Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first session of the GSIS conversation on the utopian society, which starts this year. And this year we start with a very intriguing topic, which is very innovative, and it's a part of many process of thinkings that I used to have in the last years. And I'm very happy to have this session today with my very old friend, Xinjun Zhang, who is currently the assistant professor at the University of the Medical University in Michigan, and a lovely Lumila Menéndez, who is also here tonight with us. We are going to, this is a very experimental lecture we planned for today, because this is a result of the work which I did in the last years, which was very much so inspired by the work of June, because I'm very fascinated by the topic of the archaic people and basically the history of humankind. And then recently I met Lumila, who also does the same thing. So I thought that this is really a fate that we connected all together, and we can do something together. So the topic we're going to present today, as I said, is a bit experimental, because it's a very experimental approach to look at the topic of polycrisis from the very, very beginning of the humanity. So from the moment when the humanity started to exist, when humans developed as a society, and how basically we ended up in the mess we are experiencing, which we are experiencing today. So the plan is that first I'm going to start with the deliberations that I had, and then we will come to the more technical part of June and Lumila, who are going to bring us some more deeper knowledge about the origins of humanity. This is I would say it's very interesting, because today we are, so let's start with the next slide. We are living now in the times of polycrisis. This term people started using it more broadly during the times of pandemics of COVID-19, when many crises happened at the same time. And they didn't go away. We're still experiencing them. On the one hand, we have a big disproportion of incomes. We have, according to the last data, we have 44% of world population which lives in poverty. There is still a problem of famine, of economic colonialism. We have a big problem of climate change. We have a problem of destroy and the lack of resources. We have a problem of fight for these resources. And through that, we have expanding capitalism. We have wars. That's one economic thing. The second thing are the problems which face us humans on a regular basis. This is the matter of nationalism, postcolonialism. The big problem of migration. This is how the governments present it nowadays, that the migration is a big problem, that there are people who come to one country and they want to work and live there. Then we have all the problems connected to hate towards each other. Here we have in this category Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, racism, and basically division which comes as a result of nationalism, that we divide ourselves between us and them. And then we have a strict nationality law and passportization. We all need to have passports. We all need to have some nationality. And based on that, which passport, which nationality we have, we don't have a freedom of movement. This is just one general picture of many problems we're experiencing right now. But I think these problems, they refer to all of us, because we all somehow either experience that or we observe it. What is our human state right now? So we as humans worldwide, globally, we're divided by nations, by borders, by religious groups. We all have some affiliations. We all have some affiliations, the countries where we belong to, the cultures we belong to, the passports we have. And we are already classified in certain groups, and usually we stick to that. Let me see if there's something in the chat. Can you, Wolfgang, please see it if people give some comments so we can answer? Okay. Regarding the economical conditions we live in, we have a stable categorization of the money flow globally. We have rich West, developing East, or already rich East, depends about which region we talk about, and underdeveloped third world, which already has some potential to be a developing area. It again depends on the region, on the area which we are talking about. Next big problem for a human state right now is, on the one hand, famine, which is a problem that still exists, and it will still exist in some areas. Famine is supported by the system, or system doesn't do anything to overcome this famine. When we talk about this, we can think about some areas in Africa, in South Asia, in Latin America. And together with that, we have overconsumption. We have a group of privileged people who consume really a lot, and also Europe as a continent and United States as a country. They waste tons of food, tons of products, which could be used, recycled to feed the areas which suffer famine. But that doesn't happen also because of many structural reasons. We have huge disproportion when it comes to incomes and living standards globally. And this all happens, it's formed by the prism of nationalism, religion, state educations, media representation. I would take here migration crisis as a very interesting example on how these prisms of categorization, of this paradigm, how they impact on the way how we see the topic of migration. Let's take Europe as an example, because we are right now in Vienna, and the topic of illegal migration, or basically migration, is a very important topic which European Union raises all the time into the debate, and it is a thing which is debated all the time. So we have a group of people who migrate due to economic or political reasons to the countries, which have an impact on the countries of their origins. If we take France as an example, France has a very, very big group of migrants from Africa, from Northern Africa. But these people, they migrated to France because France owned the areas where they lived for a very long time. And France as a country exploited these countries for their own economic purposes. And these people, because they were a part of France, they have a right to get French citizenship, and they use it. They go to France, they work there to get different living standards, different level of education. So here we have the questions which the state raises, the system raises. Do they have a right to come and to use the resources of France for their own benefits? So usually these people, the migrants, they come to the countries, like developed first world countries, because they already have a connection to that through the history. This is a result of colonialism, economic or political, through the military conflicts. And these colonialist countries, they possessed, they owned these areas because of the need of the natural resources. So this is one economic problem. The other thing is demagogy versus need for the specialized and regular labor force. On the one hand, we can hear all the time that the topic of migration is very raw, is very critical, that we have a lot of people from a different religious and ethnical background who enter the European countries, and how that will impact on the culture and everything. But on the one hand, the population in Europe is significantly decreasing. There is not enough of birth rates, and the system to survive, it needs a labor force. So we observe a very strong demagogy and basically a propaganda in the media, which is against, but the economic statistics show something different, that these countries, they need people, they need someone just to work. That's one thing. But on the other hand, the system doesn't have a big idea how to include, how to make an inclusion of these people, how to make them a part of the society. So then we have a division between us and them. And of course, at the end of the day, what has an impact are exactly these cultural paradigms that we are raised in, the topic of culture, religion, kinship, nationality. That all makes the example of the migration crisis complex. What is another interesting thing when it comes to the topic of migration, of human migration in general, is the topic of indigenousness. What we observe in the last year is a very strong social mobilization around the topic of the war in Gaza. The very common leitmotif which comes is the topic exactly of indigenousness. Who was the first one? Who has a right for a claim to own the territory? In this case, we have an example of Palestinians who are considered by the broad media, by the broadest image which is presented in the media, as an indigenous group. And on the other hand, we have Jewish people who say that we are indigenous because we first created a state in this area. Since we created historically the very first state, so we can see each other as an indigenous group for this area. And which we follow that logic, we can ask ourselves which group is indigenous in the all geographic areas that we have globally, which group is indigenous in Germany, which group should be considered as indigenous in Austria or in France. Where do these groups migrated from? From their which territory is indigenous for which group? Where do we all originate? And through all these deliberations, we come to the origins of the humanity. So now I will give the voice to my colleagues who, and they are going to bring you more historical and more anthropological details about how we came out here where we are. So please.
Great. Thanks, Irena. So I'm going now to challenge also this idea of indigenous and follow up on the idea of migrations that Irena just presented very well. First, by walking you through from human origins to also the origins of how we actually started to perceive the otherness. So other humans, I mean by otherness. So first I want to start by showing that this is a very important statement. Humans were only a one species, a unique species, but despite that, we're very, very diverse, very, very plastic. So we know that we humans have occupied every continent in the world, and we've been through different evolutionary processes that lead to different adaptations, and we were able to cope with very, very extreme environments, from the extreme cold to extreme hot, humid, dry, and we were very successful in occupying all these diverse environments. So we're very diverse, but despite the diversity that is huge, we're a unique species. But all this diversity, how did it come to be? So the question is, how did we originate it? So you can see these are two different kind of figures in which you can see on the left, a more classic one, probably you're more familiar with this kind of trees in which is showing like the different species, and also you have on the top the time frame showing the origin and the span of the different species. And on the right, there is a different kind of graph that shows this is more the way actually we are presenting the results today and discussing the results today, not with this linear, yes, spans, but also with this more narrow and more blurry spans. So you can see that most of the events of speciations related to human lineage, to human origins, are mostly focused on Africa. There are a few in Eurasia, yeah, but you can see that most of them, by looking at the right figure, most of them happened in Africa. Yeah. Yes, on the left you can see actually the main species that actually contributed, and in a way it's not that one follow the other, but actually you can see that actually by looking at the span, they were living contemporarily at the same time, sometimes in the same continents. Yeah. So this is the first actually idea to show how different species of humans, because some decades ago we were thinking about different species and we were not even calling all of them humans. Nowadays there is a more open-minded perspective towards our history, and we are calling most of them humans, but then when we want to refer to them, we just refer to the different species. Yeah. So different species of humans were inhabiting the same space, yes, and interacting, and also contributing to our lineage. But when we talk about Homo sapiens, so our species in particular, where do we come from? Well, we know there's plenty of evidence nowadays that we come from Africa. You can see in the map that is on the left bottom, these are the different fossils. So there are not so many, very, very ancient humans fossils that we can say with very lot of confidence that they are humans, yeah? And they are among the oldest ones. Yeah, and you can see that some of them come from South Africa, some of them come from the east of Africa, and some of them also from the north. There is also one more that is not depicted there, that comes from Greece. So there is still some debate regarding if it's a Homo sapiens or not. But yeah, there is another one that could be the first fossil of human that is not in Africa, and is dated to 200,000 years before present, and it's located in Greece. But yeah, as I said, there's discussion still. But leaving that on the side, you can see that like all the oldest fossil of humans are located in Africa. And then on the right, you can see these are the way we scientists are thinking nowadays. Instead of presenting those linear trees in which one branch follow the other, these are the way we're thinking actually about the human tree, yeah, which probably is a bit more difficult to interpret or to understand. The idea is that in the whole continent of Africa, there was what we call a meta-population, so a big population, in which different groups were spread, as you can see in the north, in the east, in the south, and all of them apparently, or most of them, contributed, probably in different ways, but contributed to the species, the diversity of our species today. Yes? And after that, we're a species, like it says here in the title of the slide, on an endless journey. After that, you can see here some of the main events, especially the main events showing the expansion to different continents, yes, or different parts that are more remote areas in the world. So we started migrating all over the world, yeah. Homo sapiens, in particular, we know that probably, if we consider the fossil that I just mentioned in Greece, probably left Africa 200,000 years before present, yeah, and then from there it arrived so immigrated to Europe, yeah, and then to Southeast Asia, from which there are two main migrations, one going all the way to Oceania, and then other one going to the north and dispersing and spreading to the Americas, yeah. So to Oceania, we can say that more or less, well, there is still debate because actually there is evidence that is found every day, and there is still, a lot of debate regarding the timing, but we can say that more or less, here in the map, it says 65 to 50,000 years, maybe it's a little bit older, maybe it's 80,000 years before present, that humans arrived to Oceania, and then going to the north of Asia, arriving then through the Bering Strait to the Americas around 20,000 or maybe even older times. So maybe it could be even 30,000 arriving to Beringia. Yeah, here is another map showing actually the same. So you can see also the arrows that show what time humans were arriving actually, when they were arriving at the different continents, different places. But also here we can see in the colors, so in yellow, in orange, and in red, that there were other humans there before. Because I said in the previous slide, I said that humans migrated out of Africa 1,000 years before present, but actually there were migrations of previous other species that happened around 2 million years before present, like Homo erectus. Yeah, Homo erectus migrated out of Africa around 1.8 million more or less years before present, and then spread all the way in Southeast Asia, occupying all that area. And then we know, and probably we will see this later in the presentation, that from Homo erectus, other species also originated. So when we expanded, we were also encountering other humans. Yes, it's not just humans colonizing different continents, but actually different encounters that were happening in different pulses at different times. This map is showing that how the early dispersals and the, for example, so in red you can see the Neanderthal. Some of the places that actually were are showing where there was a mixture with Neanderthals and also with the Denisovans, yeah, which is another species. So yeah, the idea is that we were not just expanding to an empty landscape, but actually we were expanding, and while we were expanding, we were encountering these other humans and interacting, of course, in different ways with them. And there is a lot of evidence nowadays. I mean, we have a lot, and actually the evidence is growing of admixture. So this means events in which the interaction was really, really strong, and there was gene flow between humans and these other species that were there before. We can make an analog with these encounters that humans had with these different species, like Neanderthals, Denisovans, even Homo erectus, or other species that derive from Homo erectus, with the time of colonialisms in the 15th century. So at that time, also a lot of countries in Europe started to expand to different places in the world, and there were also encounters with other humans that were living there before. Unfortunately, history shows us that those encounters were not so peaceful, or actually were not so nice, resulted in many aggressive situations. But I think it's an interesting analog to think about all these migrations and how migration actually is related with finding other people and what we can learn about that. In this slide, I want to show you how we perceive, because I think it's also related with this idea of otherness, how we perceive Neanderthals from the moment that we found the first fossils until today. So the idea is that the first fossils from Neanderthals were found, well, as you can see there, in 1829, yes, in Belgium. This is the very, very first fossil that was found. And the first interpretation was that it was a human with a pathology. So people realized that they look similar, but also a little bit different. So there were similarities, but also some differences. And the first interpretation was that it was a human, but the differences actually were telling more about that probably it had some health issues. Yeah. It's not there in the slide, but I will tell you that in the 1830s, because I work a lot in the Americas, so I will tell you this also this information. So in the 1830s, the first fossils of humans were found in Brazil. And these were the first fossils that actually were interpreted as being humans, but ancient at the same time. So it was the first evidence that actually was interpreted as being humans and ancient.
Neanderthals in Brazil?
No, not Neanderthals. So they were just Homo sapiens, but very old. And actually it was right. We know nowadays that information was right. But it's interesting to see that they were found more or less at the same time that Neanderthals, but Neanderthals were interpreted as human with pathology, and these other ones, which we know now that they are 10,000 years before present, so actually they are among the oldest humans in South America, they were interpreted as being humans and being ancient. Yeah, so this is just different interpretations on fossils, which I think it tells a lot about how people were thinking and how science was standing at that time. So only in 1864, we have William King interpreting, and he published an article that is there, interpreting Homo neanderthalensis as a separate species. So a species related to humans, but also a species that is different. And then probably you are familiar with some of these books that actually are, well, for the general public, so some are romance, that also by looking at them and also looking at how they were dealing with the topic of Neanderthals, we can see how Neanderthals were perceiving human society. So first we have a classic of Jack London, Before Adam, that is showing these Neanderthals being completely different to humans. And we can see that, for example, from the cover of this book. And then a book that is much more recent, that is, I mean, it was published very recently, showing Neanderthals as being very similar to us. Yeah. Neanderthals almost as humans. Yeah. So you can see that says the naked Neanderthals, a new understanding of the human creature. So it's even considering them as humans, something that actually was not perceived that just 50 years ago. So yes, I finished here my part of the presentation, but then this continues. But I just want to show you how, yeah, the encounters, the migration, not only the physical encounters, but also how we perceive even fossils and science, how it changed with our different paradigms. So.
Hi, everyone. So in my portion of the talk, I want to dive a little bit further into the Neanderthals, but rather like on a general picture perspective, other than Neanderthals, I also want to introduce a few archaic humans that either with solid evidence that they coexisted with us, or very possibly they geographically and also on a time perspective overlapped with modern humans. So there's possibly interbreeding or at least like encountering with them. So from my perspective, diving into the Neanderthals, Lumila just gave a really good overview of the history of them. So I'm just going to focus a little bit more on the biology. So we, like among all of the archaic humans, like basically people that are not Homo sapiens, Neanderthals is one of them that we learn the most from. There's so much fossil evidence, so much like remains, materials left, and most importantly, we even have high quality DNA from them. So there are right now at least 3 high quality genomes from Neanderthals. By high quality, I mean that's as high quality as you could get for modern humans. Like if we sequence one of us and just get some samples and get a DNA, that's basically the same quality as those genomes we got from Neanderthals, which is absolutely amazing. And that's what won Dr. Svante Pääbo a Nobel Prize a few years ago. So given all of the materials we have, we now have a really good sense of what these people are. So can we move to the next slide? You can click it again. Great. Yeah. So basically from where the remains and fossil evidence that we have, we learned that Neanderthals mainly were in the western part of Eurasia. By that, I mean most part of the continental Europe, Middle East, even a little bit into Central Asia and even Siberia. So they mainly occupied the west side of the Eurasian continent. So we know they diverged from modern humans about 500,000 years ago, and they possibly lived up until 35 or 40,000 years ago. That's around the time. And we know that since modern human left Africa before 35,000 years ago. So we basically, like the ancestors for all of us encounter them like all at once. That event may be like a one-time event, or it may be like a continuous throughout like a period of time. But the result of that is all of the non-Africans living nowadays are some level of Neanderthals. So because we have a common ancestor left Africa, interbred with them, and then we further spread all over the world. So now if you look at people from like the Americas, from Asia, from Europe, if you look into their DNA, on average, we have about 1 to 3% of the Neanderthal ancestry. Very likely, at first, it was more than 1 to 3% of them. It's probably maybe about 10%. But then over time, because we're still genetically and biologically very different people, what happened is the Neanderthal DNA we got from them are not very compatible with us. So natural selection over time removed them from our populations. So that's why nowadays we only see a very small fraction of them still left. And because of the large amount of materials left by them, we now know they have very distinct, different morphology compared to modern humans. So if you happen to have seen some of this Neanderthal cast, in the museums, you may realize that their body is like a much stronger build compared to us. It doesn't mean that they're taller than us. They're actually a little bit shorter than us. Like on average, a Neanderthal male is about 160 centimeter tall. So that's shorter than me, and their females are even slightly shorter, but they're much stronger. So if you look at their bones, it's much thicker and more robust. So in the next slides, we'll have some more specific information about the biology. Yeah, so this is one example. So one distinguished feature of Neanderthals is their midface. By midface, I mean whatever below nose. Like we're starting from like nose ridge, this midface part all popped out. So there are different hypotheses regarding like why they look like that. One hypothesis is Neanderthals were big game hunters. So they were hunting like animals as big as mammoth back at the time. And they have pretty advanced tools, but not as sophisticated as what modern human later built in Neolithic time or even later on. So they were using a lot of their body as a part of their lifestyle. So there had been one interesting hypothesis saying that the reason why they haven't popped up mid-face is because they were using their teeth as tools, in contrast to modern human, that most of our like facial features have reduced to really small sizes, and it is more adapted to like sophisticated like cognitive abilities such as like speaking and communication, rather than we really need to use our teeth to bite really hard things. The next slide shows that one explanation of why Neanderthals have more robust body compared to us is not just because they hunt big games and they need to be strong, but if you look at the proportion, like the ratio between their body versus their limbs, it looks like they're stockier than modern humans, which we have relatively longer and also skinnier like arms and legs. So that's very likely due to that we occupied a very different climate back in the day. So Neanderthals, they were mainly in Europe during the Ice Age, which is really cold. They didn't have heating. They didn't have like modern technology to help them with them coping with the rough weather, which is why they are physically cold adapted to that type of climate. So there was one biological rule called Allen's rule, basically saying that if people live in cold climate, and we still sort of observe that in modern human today, people who live in really cold places tend to have like stockier body, like it's like the ratio is different, and that's because you need to reduce the relative surface area for your body so that you don't release as much heat. But then for people who live in hot weather, like Africa, like the ancestors for modern humans, were quite the opposite, because we're kind of like expanding our relative surface area so that we can release more heat because of that helps with coping with hot weather. So those are some of the explanation of the difference between the body shape between modern humans and Neanderthals, which is really interesting. And of course, there are other features of Neanderthals that make them really easy to tell apart from modern humans. Like they have like pretty high brow ridges. They also have a elongated like back of their head. It's called occipital bone. So those are generally how Neanderthal look like. And also the next slide. Yeah. So another thing that makes Neanderthals really interesting is quite contrary to what we believed before, that modern humans is the first Homo species that developed sophisticated culture and even language. We now have more and more evidence that Neanderthals were actually not that different from us in that sense. They do have very complicated behavior, social structure. They do a lot of things just like we do. They bury their dead, which is a ritual, which is something that animals typically don't do. That people like it's only we only nowadays only see that in modern human. That is more like a cultural religious practice rather than things reacting to like the environment or like a biological instinct. So they also have very complex material culture. They've made very different tools, not just made of stone, but also made of other materials like bones, animal skins, etc. And also they made art. There's cave art evidence from Neanderthals that don't look quite different from the early modern human art. So these are, yes, they are other people, but they're also not that different from us in many ways. And most importantly, they became part of us, like literally part of us. So the next slides, I'm going to show you some of the other non-Neanderthal type of modern human, archaic humans. You may or may not have heard of them. One of them is this famous, mysterious Denisovans. So the story for Denisovans is people were originally excavating a cave in Siberia. It's called the Denisova cave. Somewhere in the middle of Siberia above Kazakhstan. People were looking at this cave because they previously have found Neanderthals in them. So other than Neanderthals, there was also other like animal, like bones in it. So people were just really looking at like more Neanderthal evidence. But that was also around the time where people have found Neanderthal DNA. So whatever bone material, so long as you identify this as archaic human, possibly Neanderthal, people were trying to drill part of this material and try to extract DNA out of that. And during this process, they identified a very different Homo lineage. That at first they thought it was Neanderthal, but then the DNA evidence suggests that this is completely something, a sister group of Neanderthal that is equidistant to modern humans. So as you can see from this little piece of pinky finger bone on this picture, so that's where they extracted part of the bone material, and they found a high quality DNA out of that. By high quality, I mean it's the same level of high quality as those 3 high quality Neanderthals, and also as high quality as modern human DNA today. So we still don't know almost anything about the Denisovans in terms of how they look like, because most of the bone evidence we found from them are extremely like highly fragmented. Like it's very hard to piece together what their face look like. We can make some like wild guess, but it's hard to do a facial reconstruction like what we did with Neanderthals. And other than that, one genome from a single individual, it was a 12-year-old girl. We so far, at least from the published data, that's pretty much everything we have genetically. There are some either low quality genome or low quality genome from Neanderthal Denisovan hybrids. And there's also rumor that there may be a second high quality Denisovan genome available soon, but we haven't seen that yet. So we still know very little about them. But from that single genome we have, we are able to do a lot of comparative genetic work with Neanderthals and also with modern humans to try to piece together, figure out what type of people these are. So can you click next? Yeah, so from that high quality genome, we figure that the Denisovans diverge from modern humans around the same time Neanderthals diverged from modern humans, which is also about 500,000 years ago. They also lived until up to like 40,000 years. So it's around the same time when Neanderthals disappeared. Both the Denisovans and Neanderthals had historically very small population size. So they're compared to modern humans, like where we're very big. When we had to expand out of Africa, they were relatively small. But the Denisovans compared to Neanderthals, we think they have quite different geographical distribution. In contrast to Neanderthals that were mainly found in Western Eurasia, the Denisovans, looking at which modern humans that still have the Denisovan DNA, it was mainly the Asians and also the Oceanians. So we think the Denisovans were occupying the eastern part of Eurasia, like they overlapped a little bit in Siberia, but the Denisovans were mainly in like East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, and all the way into the Oceanians. The next slide. So this is a distribution of the Denisovan DNA that are still carried by modern humans nowadays. So as you can see here, a darker color means 0 to no Denisovan ancestry. So Europeans, on average, don't have Denisovan ancestry. But then as you move further to the East, East Asians have a lot of them. Well, relative to Europeans, like a little bit more, but by far the people who have the most Denisovan ancestry are the Oceanians, like Papua New Guinea people, and also those Pacific Islanders. So that kind of give us a sense of how we encounter Denisovans. We think there's possibly more than one contact with Denisovans, and by Denisovan, we also don't know what exactly they are, but we know these people who have genetic similarities to that one genome that we have. It possibly happened more than once, even more than twice. So we think that people who are in the Oceanians, the reason why they have the most Denisovan ancestry is possibly because they most recently encountered them, and also that admixture amount, or that mixing amount is a little more than, say, East Asians. So the next slide. So, well, we can click it again to just show the full picture. Yep. Okay, so the next slides, I'm going to show you that other than Neanderthals and Denisovans, where we have understood quite a lot, both from bone material and also from genetic material, what the idea I want to give you is the human evolution is really complicated. Those people that we have species named for are not the only people that were living out there all at once that overlapped with us in time and space. So in Asia, for example, the picture is much more complex and diverse, and there are a lot of fossil evidence that clearly are not modern human. Like you can see that there are a lot of archaic features, but they just don't belong to a known phylogeny that we can name so far. So they're all given different names. We don't know if they were what we call Denisovans because there's no DNA evidence. We also don't know if they're descendants or related to Homo erectus. We know that for sure at some point lived in East Asia, but we just want to show you that this is like much more complex than we previously think, and that evolutionary tree may easily change the next day. So, for example, there's this famous dragon man people have found a few years back in northern China that, to me, it clearly looked like either a Neanderthal or something like that. There's also the Red Deer Cave in southwest China that looked like has some clear archaic features that is similar to what we would expect from the Denisovan or Neanderthal type of people. So then we don't know if they actually interbred with us, like what we call the Denisovan, since it's not really like a group based on like bone evidence, if these people actually are different subgroups of them, but there is a possibility out there. The next two slides, I want to show you some of the really interesting, amazing Homo species that is just bizarre. One of them you may have heard of is called a Homo floresiensis. We also call them hobbits. The reason why I call them hobbits is they're so much shorter than us. They may be some descendants of Homo erectus. They're found in the Flores Islands in Java, in Indonesia. They're on average only 1 meter tall, so like a very, very small kid. But they possibly lived until a time that modern humans also arrived to the same islands. The reason why they're that small is possibly because of this island effect. So when animals, including human, move to small islands, there's an effect that bigger animals tend to shrink in size and small animals tend to get larger. So that's the island effect. So we think that the reason why they are so small is not necessarily because they're malnutrition. It's likely because of this island effect dwarfism that made them look like that. There was also stone tools found associated with them. They're possibly hunting those, also the dwarf elephants on the islands. So these are just some really bizarre cases of archaic humans. And then the next slide, my last slide, I want to highlight a type of archaic human found in Africa. So they're called Homo naledi. So they were found just about 12 years ago in South Africa. If we click one more time, there it shows the cave where people found them. Can you just click one more time? Wait. Okay, I don't know why it's gone, but okay. So they were found in a cave system where modern humans were going into the cave for exploration, because those cave systems are really narrow and they're really windy, like, and very long beneath the ground. And as people were going through these caves, some of these explorers found fossils, or at first they thought these were modern humans. And it turned out these are some really interesting looking archaic humans that lived about 200 to 300,000 years ago, which is also around the time when modern humans were everywhere in Africa. They were just about to leave Africa to go to like Eurasia. So Homo naledi, there are a lot of interesting and sometimes controversial documentaries out there. They're smaller than us. They look quite unique because they show a very mixed feature between what we expect from modern humans and also what we expect from archaic humans. So are they really like a mix between modern humans and some of the long-living archaic humans in Africa? We don't really know. But it's possible they coexisted with us and even intentionally or unintentionally like interbred with us. We don't have evidence of that yet. But one thing that is interesting to bring up is even if these people were found from more than 200,000 years ago, the fact that they were found in these caves that are really hard to get to possibly imply that it was some intentional ritual burial, that they didn't end up there by chance. Some living people brought them there after they died. So that's the hypothesis so far. So I finished my part.
So with this brief retrospective on the human origins, we basically see that the humanity comes from Africa. We can deduct it based on the archaeological finds we found. So basically bones. We do it in such a way that we found the bone, we find out how old it is, and based on that we can do further hypothesis. So nowadays, based on the science we have, we can say that the humanity comes from Africa. And here I just gave an example of a painting of Gauguin, which is titled exactly like that. Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? This is the questions that humanity asks itself always. The matter of origins of humans is usually very, very emotional, because we have, on the one hand, the concept of evolutionism, creationism, mythology, and Darwinism. So Darwinism and evolutionism, they go together, that nowadays we follow the ideas of Darwin, and by the way, also his grandfather, because his grandfather had first this idea that humans might origins from animals, and his grandson later just developed that idea into more details, because he had an access to knowledge by traveling to Galapagos and so on. Nowadays, when we have like a pure science that we as humans we developed from the primates, that we come from Africa, this is one thing. But then we have this long tradition of mythology, of religion, which brings the spirit of creationism, that we humans, we are very spiritual creatures, and we cannot just come like that from animals. There must be something bigger that created us. But nevertheless, humans, they always ask themselves, who are we? How did we come up here? On the one hand, based on the knowledge and on the systems we had, so this mythology, religion, and so on, and on the other hand, based on the observations that they did. And here I would like to bring shortly the philosophy of pre-Socratics. Pre-Socratics were the very first philosophers that are noted by the history. These were the first Greek philosophers, and we include in them many people, but foremost Thales, Pythagoras, and Anaximander, Zenon. And they actually ask these questions: who are we? What is the stuff around us? Where does it come from? How can we explain the basic things that happen with us? How can we explain that the sun is shining, the moon is shining, the flows, the tides? And they did it through observation, through empirical research, but they also had an exchange, a scientific exchange with Egypt and with Babylon. These were two the richest and the most developed countries that time. And they traveled to get the knowledge. And they tried to explain exactly who are we. And here we are talking about the 6th century before the Christ. Many scientists, many observers noticed through years that there is some strong similarity between us humans and animals. We can bring as an example Taoism. So the Asian philosophical stream, which shows strong emphasis of the interconnectednesses of all living beings, including humans and animals. A very interesting approach we can observe among the indigenous people in Amazonia. Many tribes, they see themselves on the level of animals. Like when a shaman, when he brings himself into this shamanic, when he's about to perform the rituals, when he puts the costume for that purpose, he settles himself on a level of an animal to be closer to nature. And that's already a very interesting tendency that we have, that the shaman becomes an animal and he's also a human. Aristotle, he wrote a great book, Historia Animalium, where he also listed many physical and behavioral similarities between humans and the primates. And Darwin, with his theory of the evolution, that's a well-known thing. When I thought about how we came up to have all these categories and everything, why we wanted to rationalize, how do we want to find out what's the source of everything, I thought that probably how we came up to this condition is just the fact that we live in this, as in German there is a beautiful term for that, Leistungsgesellschaft. So the society which needs to all the time perform, which needs to improve. And that's strongly connected to capitalism itself. It's very important for the system that you have this paradigm, that you have a people who are rational, who work in a certain system, in a certain frame, and they are able to perform the work to make the system going. The topic of paradigm and rationalism was introduced to science in Europe foremost by Immanuel Kant, who was the most German guy ever. Like the guy, every day he had the same schedule. Like he woke up at the same hour, he worked for a certain amount of hours, then he went for a walk, he ate, he went back, he worked. Every day was absolutely the same. It's said that he lived in Königsberg. There is an anecdote that people who lived in Königsberg, they didn't need a clock because they just observed what Kant does. If Kant went out for a walk, it means that it's 12 o'clock. So Kant, with his rationalism and paradigm of rationalism, he's really somehow a quintessence of this Leistungsgesellschaft, that you need to be a functional human being to work in a system framework to perform the same things to make the system going on. And this classification is basically very important in science. We use it every day. We have here Linnaeus, who classified the world of the animals. We have Luhmann with his systems theories, where he created theories for every single sphere of our lives. Going to Asia, Confucius, he had in his philosophy, everyone has a place in the world order, and we need to treat people according to that position. There is Ordnung and system and framework for everything. An advanced society works in a proper manner to keep the system going on, but on the other hand, it needs some ideology, it needs some mythology to show that we are very special, so we can disconnect from the nature. Because if we look at ourselves on the level of animals, that we are also a part of nature, then the question is, why do we build the houses? Why do we exploit the coal mines? Like, why do we do the stuff to sell them and so on? If we look on the world of animals, that they just live the way they live, so just to survive, they eat, they multiply, they sleep, the next day goes again. Because evolution, as can we close the door? Because evolution as itself has really no point. Like this, here I quote the Professor Zhang, who says that evolution itself has no point, because it's, you just copy your material, you get the resources to make your material to survive. Like we multiply, we have children, we need to feed them, and so they can grow up and they can multiply again. It's very abstract, it really has no sense. Like there is no deep meaning in that actually, apart from multiplying and reproducing ourselves. And this Leistungsgesellschaft, who needs to work to be in a certain framework, they had to bring some higher explanation, some higher meaning, to show that the meaning of life, the role of humans, must be somehow very, very special. And now, when we get back to the first idea that we had in the beginning, the idea to the polycrisis, that we made a long way from being primates to what we have today, that we have a climate crisis, that we have most probably the Third World War standing in front of our doors, and it can start any time, that we have problem with the resources, that we have huge inflation and everything. The question is what to do for us, to humans, to survive this difficult time. Because of course, these deliberations that we are having right now, what to do with the society, what to do with the system, is a very luxurious problem to think about. The most of the humanity, they live in terrible conditions. People suffer poverty, they suffer famine. And thinking about the system is not probably the first thing that they are going to do. But still, people intuitively, they want to have a safe space, and they want to have just good, normal conditions to survive, to make it for living, just like animals. Animals, they want to have a safe space in nature. They want to multiply, they want to eat, and they want to make their species to live on. So here are very general ideas how we can make it to go to basics, by building communities, by building independence, self-sufficiency. And of course, it's the matter of resources. How many resources we need to survive as humans. That's that for now. I hope that we are going to have now a beautiful discussion. I'm going now to finish the recording, and we can start having a discussion.